Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on transforming our world. This webinar is sponsored by DigitalGlobe and Geospatial Media. Today's webinar topic is on geospatial information, key to achieving UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The presenters for today are Kumar Navlur, who is the Senior Director and Strategic Business Development for DigitalGlobe, joined by Bhanu Rekha, who is the Managing Editor of GeoBiz at Geospatial Media and Communications. First, we'll have presentation from Bhanu, who will be talking on the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, followed by presentation by Dr. Kumar on supporting the Sustainable Development Goals with geospatial technology. This will be followed by the question and answer session and discussions, which is open to all participants. I'll now invite Bhanu to start her presentation.
Thank you, Harsha. This is about the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The United Nations, the Millennium Development Goals were initiated in the year 2000 after consolidating several disparate sustainable development initiatives and bringing them into a common framework, and the agenda also set concrete goals. After 15 years, the time frame for this agenda was from 2000 to 2015. Significant progress has been made in a number of areas, though the progress was uneven, particularly in the least developed and developing countries. In fact, many of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, were never fully realized, in particular those related to maternal, newborn child and reproductive health. So to continue the development strides and to fulfill the vision of the MDGs, the United Nations announced the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September 2015. This is quite an ambitious, integrated, indivisible, and in fact transformational global agenda to reach the furthest behind first. Under this, the agenda set 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 associated targets, which are, as I said, integrated, indivisible, and also quite cross-cutting. These goals promise to achieve sustainable development in 3 dimensions: economic, social, and environmental, in quite a balanced way. What you see on the screen are the 17 goals, right from no poverty to zero hunger, good health, quality education, climate action, life below water, life on land, and also peace and justice as strong institutions. The interagency and expert group on SDG indicators developed a very detailed report on the indicator framework for each of the goals and targets set forth by the agenda. The goals and targets have already come into effect from 1st January 2016, and this will guide the decisions and actions of all the member states for the next 15 years. This agenda is global, but it takes different national realities into consideration and allows governments to incorporate these goals and targets into their national planning processes and strategies as per their priorities. How many of you understand or know about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how important, which of the UN Sustainable Development Goals are important for your work? Please join the poll. The next 15 seconds you can take this poll. Is it the poverty, hunger and health, clean energy, water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communications? Please share your ideas of what SDG is very important for you and your work and your organization. Okay, here we go, and we stop the voting. Okay, so the basic objective of the 2030 agenda is that no one should be left behind on the path of development. But to be able to make this a reality, effective and evidence-based planning and also periodic reviews are required. And that will require quality, accessible, timely, and reliable data. So data is the bedrock of planning and also measuring and monitoring the SDG progress. But we see that we are living in a world of data. We all agree that. We see certain societies are experiencing a deluge of data, but this is not a uniform scenario across the world. So this is creating a situation of data paradox between developed countries and least developed countries. While the developed economies are grappling with an abundance of data, well, there are parts of globe where data scarcity prevails, especially in the least developed countries. The paradox is actually a symptomatic of a broader disparity. Those countries and societies experiencing data scarcity are also those that tend to be most vulnerable, particularly with respect to poverty, gender inequality, conflict, and extremism, disasters, and climate change. In fact, the 2030 agenda acknowledges that this data paradox is true and that baseline data for several of the targets is unavailable. And so this agenda calls for increased support for strengthening data collection and capacity development in member states to develop national and global baselines where they do not exist. So let's take another poll. Where do you fall in the data paradox continuum? Please take this poll. So you have abundant data, but you have data, but it's not easily accessible. Your organization has dearth of data, or you just cannot say. Please submit your impression and take the next 15 seconds. Okay, here we go, and we stop the voting. Close the poll. So the United Nations actually is committing to engaging in a systematic follow-up and review of the implementation of this agenda over the next 15 years at national, regional, and global levels. But to be the paragraph 76 of the outcome document of 2030 agenda actually pledges to promote transparent and accountable scaling up of appropriate public-private cooperation to exploit Earth observation and geospatial information. In fact, the United Nations vows to support developing countries, particularly African countries and least developed countries, in strengthening the capacities of national statistical offices and data systems to ensure access to high quality, timely, reliable, and disaggregated data. So, for example, if you take the SDG on zero hunger, the goal talks about ending hunger, achieving food security, and improved nutrition and promoting sustainable agriculture. For achieving the goal 2.4, especially, the indicator framework actually mandates countries to periodically monitor and estimate the proportion of agricultural land under such resilient practices. But where are the farms that adopted technology and increased the productivity? Which areas are more prone to natural disasters or to the effects of climate change? These are the questions, and many more questions need to be answered to be able to estimate the proportion of agricultural land under productive and sustainable agriculture. as the agenda mandates each countries to do. But we see comprehensive and accurate location-based information drawn from satellite and aerial Earth observation data can be used to support such measuring and monitoring outcomes. Collected at local, national, and global levels and supported by IT tools and other best available technologies, Earth observation data can play a very critical and insightful role in monitoring the targets, in tracking the progress, and helping the countries make midterm corrections to the sustainable development targets they have taken upon themselves. When you combine with the demographic and statistical data, the Earth observation data can actually enable countries to monitor even change over a period of time in a very standard format and make decisions. Dr. Kumar Navlur will now share more insights about how Earth observation imagery can support the Sustainable Development Goals. Over to you, Kumar.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how geospatial technologies, especially satellite remote sensing, can help supporting the SDGs. So before we do that, I have a quick poll for you. Do you think satellite imagery can be used to create a detailed imagery baseline of the nation? Please join me in the poll. The poll is now open. So just to repeat the question, do you think satellite imagery can be used to create a detailed imagery baseline of the nation? So I think we are running out of time, so I'm going to stop the voting now. And I saw a question that will we be sharing these polls? We will at the end of the session. So let's get back to the presentation. So when we look at what has happened in the remote sensing industry, especially the commercial remote sensing industry in the last 15 years, I would call it an evolution. And what this evolution has done is it has changed what I call a data poor paradigm into a data rich paradigm. So today, DigitalGlobe has a constellation of 4 very high resolution satellites that collect detailed imagery of the planet anywhere from 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters to 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. And we are launching one more satellite later this year, WOB4. So the first aspect is, can you collect the entire Earth at a detailed level? And the answer is absolutely yes. The next question is, can you collect it at scale? So when you take the entire constellation, including WOB4, these satellites can collect over 3 million square kilometers a day, or approximately 8 to 9 times the land mass every year. So now we have the capability not only to map the entire globe at very detailed level, but also map them and update these maps on a frequent basis so we can actually map and monitor the SDGs. So the image you're looking at is actually a remote village in Africa where now this technology allows you to identify every single structure, even if it is 2 meters by 2 meters. These satellite technologies are now able to address even the smallest houses as well as the remote areas of your nation. So as Banu was talking about, UNGJM has a recommendation of various foundational data layers. So I will show you how you can take a picture, and as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now the question is, how do you extract the specific features for the 17 SDGs and the 169 indicators Banu was talking about? So in this particular case, this is Mamou, New Guinea, and where we were able to take the imagery, and in this case, we are using crowdsourcing, where we extracted every single structure, every single road, as well as lots of points of interest like parks within 24 hours. So that's the beauty of this technology is either once you have the base layer of the imagery, now you can actually start extracting the relevant information. So another example, recent years, thanks to cloud computing as well as various high performance computing technologies, now we can actually start processing data at scale. What I'm showing here are advanced machine learning, artificial intelligence technologies that were able to take the large area and start identifying every single settlement based on the human patterns. Once you have the settlements, then you can use them for defining the administrative boundaries, which is one of the core layers defined for the SDGs. The other interesting aspect is now the technology has come where you can actually take local census data, feet on the ground, and other information to start estimating population density. Foundational to answering and monitoring the SDGs is understanding where people live, how many people live in a given location, and how do you get to them. So now we have these technologies that can help you do that. So let's do another poll. Today, how are you creating your base maps derived from satellite imagery? Please join me in the poll. So there are a variety of techniques available, all the way from manual to semi-automated, fully automated. So I would like to know how your particular organization or your particular country is using these techniques to extract the foundational layers to support the SDGs, or for that matter of fact, in your national map making. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop the vote now so that we can go ahead with our presentation. So when you look at the foundation question is, okay, now you can collect the data, you can collect it at scale. Can you extract this information so that you can map national level SDG metrics and then monitor these going forward to 2030? So to do that, there are 4 different aspects you need to consider. The first one, I call it content. Today, DigitalGlobe has created a 0.5 meter. I would wish it is almost cloud-free mosaic of the entire world, which is very accurate. And we are now working on in Asia, where in the cloudy regions we're trying to create these mosaics. But 2/3 of the world is done, and we'll finish the rest of the world by end of the year. So to give you another specific example, in 2015, early 2015, we created a mosaic of entire Africa at 0.5 meter. And to give you some idea, we only 0.5% of the 30 million square kilometers, we didn't have any data. And since 2015, we have used the constellation of satellite to fill those holes. Clouds are always an issue, but having a constellation of the satellites always helps you. So in 2015, when we did the mosaic on DRC in Africa, we only had 75% cloud-free mosaic. And as of a month ago, we are now at 90% cloud-free. So this is something the DigitalGlobe is committed to, is creating as much as possible cloud-free mosaic that can become the foundational base layer for creating the foundational layers for monitoring SDGs. So when you talk about extracting these layers, the one I want to focus on is elevation. Elevation is a key aspect. Now there are automated technologies that can take our rich image library that goes back to 2000 and can extract elevation either at 0.5 meter posting, 1 meter posting for the entire nation. And we have now the systems that can scale to millions of square kilometers every year. And the other key aspect you have to keep in mind is, what does this database you're creating will look like 10 years from now, 15 years from now? As you start using data from multiple sources, you will run into issues about consistency of the data, accuracy of the data. So we have developed an architecture that will ensure you to create a database for SDGs, not only for today, but that can actually sustain you to measure and monitor the progress through 2030. So when you talk about something like a half a meter mosaic of an entire nation, you're talking about some big data sets. So there are a variety of platforms for your national spatial data infrastructure or NSDI that range from cloud on the cloud if you have access to the clouds, or if not, yeah, there are enterprise solutions that you can have behind the firewall. And the good news is that all the data, the half a meter mosaic and the new data we collect is available at the fingertips of the end users on online today. The third aspect I talk about is technology. Okay, now you have the content and you have the platform to host the content. How do you visualize the data? How do you make a map over it? How do you do analytics like maybe flood shell, where the flooding could happen, or watershed modeling? All these technologies, either from GIS, BIM, or remote sensing or CAD, are now being ported into cloud, and they're available as technology as a service. So now you can actually, you have the content, you have the platform, and you have the technology to actually analyze and create reports on the progress you're making in your nation for a given SDG. And finally, but very critical, are the policies. A lot of times there is confusion around, can I share this data with my neighboring nation? Can I share within my state, local governments? So DigitalGlobe is actively working on various data policies, including open data policy, that will make it clear on what you can do with the data. And at the end, when we look at SDGs, there are three stakeholders we're trying to address. The first one are the local citizens themselves who will benefit in terms of the various goals of the SDGs. The local governments who can actually take advantage of the technologies to ensure that they're designing the SDGs and implementing them and monitoring the progress quantitatively. And finally, the international organizations could be donors or other agencies who are interested in how their investments are going in a given nation. So with that, we will stop the presentation and we'll open the floor for questions.
Okay, thank you, Kumar and Banu. We have 6 questions till now, and more questions are coming in. So the first question is there any plan by UN to set up a constellation of Earth observation satellites to make imagery readily available to member countries?
I believe that is a question for United Nations, but what I can talk to is the commercial industry is working on collecting and refreshing the entire planet on a frequent basis. But there are also organizations such as GEO, which is Global Earth Observation, and GEOS, which is Global Earth Observation Systems of Systems, that are trying to aggregate data from multiple open data sources. So yes, there are activities going on where the United Nations is a part of, but as well as commercial industry collecting very high resolution data to support the SDGs.
Thank you. The next question is how Earth observation suppliers can help the stakeholders in Africa and Asia to get the right data or information to create more initiatives that will help in good use of Earth observation data.
So one of the key things is the old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And as you know, a lot of these satellites collect data much beyond what our human eye can see. So we collect in near infrared, and with our latest satellites, we also collect in shortwave infrared. So you can actually start extracting specific information layers, such as not only you can digitize the field boundaries. Again, we need to think the concept of fit for purpose here. You can digitize for land tenure, agricultural field boundaries from this mosaic. That's part one of the story. But if you're interested in understanding the commodities, the crop inventories, the crop health, all these spectral information is already collected. So there are tools, and we use the term APIs that we are developing so that you can actually select the content and then select an algorithm and say, this is the output I'm looking for. So we are working on what we call a geospatial big data platform that makes this analytics on scale. So that is where the industry is going, that it's not just about content, it's about answering the specific questions you're interested in.
Okay, can you talk specifically about the initiatives you are doing in Africa once again, because the question is more related to Africa, Kumar?
So around Africa, the first thing we started was to actually create the mosaic of Africa. This half-a-meter mosaic is available for purchase from DigitalGlobe and our partners across the globe. And in terms of working with Africa, today we work with the various African nations, but also we work with international organizations such as the Gates Foundation, United Nations, World Bank, that have specific projects that are going in Africa. So we are actively working in Africa, but I think it's not only direct, but also with other international organizations.
Okay, the next question is, who are the policymakers that are aware or accessing the imagery to support the goals of SDGs? Is there a disconnect between the technical work and those doing monitoring and evaluation projects?
So this policy is a very interesting question. I have been fortunate to be part of the UNGGIM, where we are actually working with various international governments as well as other agencies to address these specific policy questions. I do believe there are a lot of disconnects today, but hopefully the work UNGGIM is doing, along with the focus on SDGs, we will start addressing the issues with the policies.
Okay, the next question is, how do you monitor population growth via satellite imagery, and how can you identify new settlements?
So this is actually one of the sweet spots of the technology. Uh, uh, Today, what we have, as I mentioned before, we are collecting around 3 million square kilometers a day. And a single satellite for us, let's take Worldview 2 as an example, can collect 10,000 square kilometers, up to 10,000 square kilometers in less than a minute. So this means I can actually start collecting large metropolitan areas. And then when I have two different dates of imagery, there are various change detection algorithms that can tell you what are the changes from the baseline. That's one aspect of that. And then, as I mentioned, we have machine learning algorithms, and also we have partners who have very specific algorithms that can extract every structure. And then how do you go from structure to population density is based on some assumptions and the type of structures, the type of neighborhood. So this is where there are various organizations that specialize in this, where we are working with them to estimate what are the new population changes once you have the baseline data from satellite imagery.
Okay, Kumar, there is a question on availability of LiDAR data globally. Do you want to comment on that?
So right now, the way I understand LiDAR data is it's typically the kind of data we're talking about, 1 meter postings or 2 meter postings, which are more relevant to our conversation, are primarily on airplanes. So scaling that to a global level will be very difficult. So in the absence of that, what we're doing is that when you start collecting entire nations, we call them multi-pass stereo, where you happen to have a stereo data set where two different satellites collected the same area. Now there are automated techniques that can extract elevation. And as I mentioned before, we are collecting at 0.5 meter and 30 centimeter resolution. So you can start getting elevation data at 1 meter or 0.5 meter postings. But scaling LiDAR using aerial platforms globally is not a viable solution today.
Okay, the next question is, DigitalGlobe has made available the global mosaic, but how accessible is it to a common man or a researcher?
So there are several answers to that. Is if you're interested in purchasing that, we have a global network that can definitely provide you based on the area. We have various licensing models, and you can basically either contact us. I think we will share this presentation and my email address, and this is available for purchase today. And then in terms of researchers, that's a different discussion. We do some research cooperation with various organizations. Also, please contact us, and we'll tell you how we can work with you on research projects.
The next question is DigitalGlobe involved in the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and how?
So the way UN, we are part of the UN GGIM group of experts on the global geospatial information system. UN GGM has been graceful to invite private industry and get our inputs on how these various technologies can help with SDGs. So that's how we are involved, is through UN GGIM.
Next question is, what about the availability of free satellite imagery for sustainable development purposes?
So when it comes to free satellite data, I would recommend going to the GEO or the GEOS website, which is Global Earth Observation Systems of Systems. So GEO is Global Earth Observation. And again, keep in mind that this is a international organization that is working with various governments with satellites and putting the data together. So that is where you should be able to find the free data you're looking for. Whereas what we are doing at DigitalGlobe is creating, in a lack of better word, accurate, authoritative data, which is at finer detail, that's available for purchase as well.
So the next question is, what is the future prospect of availability of sub-meter DEM for the entire world?
So right now we're at DigitalGlobe. We're already we partnered with a company called Raycon that's already producing half a meter posting point cloud data using our image library, which is around now 80 petabytes, or close to 6-7 meters. So this is a very possibility, and this is happening as we speak. So this data, if you want a specific area, please contact us. But you will see us releasing this kind of data going forward, nation by nation.
In one of the slides you've shown, there are roads and addresses. The person wants to know how to assure to extract the exact address information.
So there are a couple of things. When you talk about, so we can identify every structure from imagery because it's clearly visible. And how do you extract it, as we talked about, can be manual, semi-automated, or automated, depending on the kind of accuracies you're looking for. So now once you have a structure, how do you get an address system? So one of the things we are looking into is there is something called a universal address system that can assign a very unique ID. And then there are always the local addresses, which vary from country to country, which vary language by language. So when I talk about address systems, I'm more talking about the universal address system once you extract the structure from imagery.
Okay, then the next question is, major challenge is accuracy of the data in remote sensing and ground truth. Remote sensing and ground truthing differ often. How do you take care of this uncertainty in the data you produce?
Okay, so let's talk about accuracy first. So when you talk about the final location accuracy from the imagery, there are three components that dictate what the accuracy is. The first one is the pointing accuracy of the satellite. To give you an idea, we calibrate our satellites every day, and all our world-class satellites, our pointing accuracy is somewhere between 1 to 3 meters across the globe. This is where you need to keep in mind when you talk about small sats that are coming along. They are typically 100 to 200 meters off. So this is where investing in high-resolution imagery becomes relevant from an accuracy perspective. And then even the same satellite, when it comes back from day 1 to day 10, for example, will have spatial offsets. So we have technologies that basically take one imagery and then register to the base layer. So that's how we make it consistent over time. The second aspect of accuracy is elevation models. So this is where we talk about creating the elevation models because the better the elevation model, the higher the accuracy, or vice versa. If you use SRTM 90-meter or 30-meter data, then you live with the errors that come with the SRTM elevation data. Finally, an enabler that makes accuracy better are ground control points. So we're also looking into technologies that can not only take our satellite imagery and good elevation models, but also create these control points so that we can get the best accuracy we can. And then now you're talking about relative accuracy with a mobile device. It could be a smartphone or it could be a tablet in the field. So one of the key things we talk about is think not only about location but also context. So we're working on technologies where if somebody is in the field, we want them to use this high accuracy Mosaic as a reference layer and register those points onto the image. That's how we're addressing the both absolute and relative accuracies.
Okay, Kumar, we'll stop the questions because we have so many questions still coming in. We'll share with you privately, and you can answer to the attendees, which are very particular on DigitalGlobe partnerships and all.
Okay.
Yeah. So we come to the end of this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll send you a recorded summary of this webinar, and thank you.